the first topic of discussion. Now, Derek and I are very open that we are big-time Husker fans. There's no discrediting that. It's just the facts. We're huge Husker fans. I was born and raised in Nebraska. He came later, but, he went to UNL, and we got him that way, but he's converted that way. That's fine. So as a Husker fan, the start to this season is difficult, and it's definitely not how we thought it would be. I'm sure everybody in the state of Nebraska thought that at this point in the season, Nebraska would be 3-0, looking strong going into the Michigan game. That's not the case. Mother Nature took our first game. We lost a heartbreaker to Colorado and just had, quite frankly, not a very good game against Troy. Let's be honest with ourselves. So we're sitting at 0-2. Very strong possibility if Nebraska doesn't bring their A game and they keep having the penalties and the turnovers that have plagued them in the first two games, very easily will be 0-3. That's not good. Any way you slice it, it's not a good situation. And yes, Nebraska is 0-2 for the first time since 1957. So it's not looking great for Husker Nation. But let me just say this. Before you start sharpening your pitchforks, which I know a lot of you already have, think about what you're doing. First of all, I think it also has to play in the fact that we've hyped up this guy way too much. I was a part of it. Everybody was a part of this. You get excited. You get somebody like Scott Frost, this hot young coach, not just physically, wink, but you get this young coach who took a team like UCF who didn't win a game and in 2 years makes them a 13-0 football team, including a victory against a pretty good Auburn team. So now you have this storybook situation where a guy from Nebraska played for the Huskers, won championships, comes home. So now you build up this idea of him, and there's a legitimate Messiah complex with Scott Frost. There is a legitimate group of fans that the minute that Scott Frost got off that plane and walked into the press conference, believed that he was going to be the greatest coach in college football history and believed that he was going to take Nebraska to the promised land and return them to the 90s so Husker fans would stop being a joke and stop being made fun of, that saying, hey, it's just like everything else. They're stuck in the 90s. They're like the 85 Bears fans of college football. And it's okay to think that way if you're delusional. I was one of those people who said I think Scott Frost will be very successful at Nebraska and have a very good career coaching this team, but I never said that day one he was going to change everything. To think that a coach will do that immediately is ridiculous. And there are coaches that in their second year have won championships, but you know what? They are legendary coaches. And I'm not saying that Scott Frost can't be that level. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think Scott Frost, with time, could be the next Urban Meyer. Could be the next elite level coach. I'm not ready to say Nick Saban yet because Nick Saban is almost in his own class. I'm not ready to go there. But when you look at the record and you see 0-2, so when you look at the record and you look who we lost to, I know immediately you want to sit down in front of your keyboard and go on social media and bash him and bash this staff and do what we've done many times as Husker fans. Believe me, I've done it. I get reminded of it with my Facebook memories, especially this time of year, all too often about how I was with that stuff. How bad I was with Pelini. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I think I was really, really bad last season. I think several times I shared my sentiment with different gifs of someone blowing their brains out. And I felt that way last year. We were 4-8. We were garbage. But I have not once said a bad thing about Scott Frost on social media, and I'll tell you why. Because this is not Mike Riley. This is not Bo Pelini. Nebraska does not have an easy schedule. They have one of the harder schedules in the country. First of all, Akron isn't a terrible football team. Granted, we didn't get to play them because of weather, but if we were to play Akron, they're not an awful football team. And we look at this too. Colorado came off a butt-whooping against in-state rival Colorado State. And I think Colorado isn't a bad team. and I have a legitimate shot with the Pac-12 South because the Pac-12 is not a great conference. Troy went 11-2 last year, including a win in Baton Rouge. So these are not bad football teams. And you know what? Nebraska had several opportunities to win both those games. It was just turnovers and penalties. And you know why that happens? Because it's a young football team. Bill Parcells, legendary coach, one of his most famous quotes is this: "You want me to make the meal, I need the ingredients." Scott Frost is going to be successful in Nebraska, but he just doesn't have the ingredients yet. And he's started to recruit that way, and he's starting to get the guys there. But you know what? These are freshmen, sophomore players. They are not ready for the limelight. They are not ready to be elite. Experience is the most important ingredient for success in any level of football. I'm talking Pee-wee, I'm talking high school, I'm talking college, NFL. Our star quarterback, sorry, I'm such a homer. I'm starting to claim the team is we. But the star quarterback that Nebraska has, Adrian Martinez, is a true freshman. These are not juniors and seniors. There are sprinkled out through the team, sure, but the star players are not there. And you know what else? These losses. You lose by 5 one week, you lose by 6 the next. I'm sorry, 5. You lost by 5 in both games. When you lose by a combined 10 points in those 2 losses, Nebraska was never out of these games. They looked like they should have been against Troy. They did not play well at all, but they were never out of these games. Never once do you scratch your head. When you look at Chip Kelly and you look at Willie Taggart in those situations at Florida State and UCLA respectively, you are looking at 2 teams where you see that they look like they have no idea what they're doing. They look so out of place. I mean, Florida State lost by 23 points to Syracuse. And I'm not saying Syracuse is a bad team. No, I'm not. But I'm just saying they had no shot in that game. They had no shot against Virginia Tech, and they had to schedule Buckwheat State to even have a chance at winning. Florida State is going to be a 3-9 or 4-8 team. UCLA, God knows how bad they're going to fall because they don't look very good either. They were competitive for maybe a half against Oklahoma, but that's it. So when you get ready to stir up in that pitchfork, look at Florida State and look at UCLA. And I know it's hard to be a Husker fan when you have to face the reality that the Kansas Jayhawks, good old Rock Chalk Jayhawk, has more wins than you right now. But keep in mind, this kind of mentality of they have to win immediately is ridiculous because Nebraska hasn't been a football school since the 90s. Nebraska is currently a volleyball school. So stop being delusional about Nebraska. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't want this for Nebraska. I want this for Nebraska. Are you kidding me? As a fan, you want your team to win a championship every season. As a fan, you want a team to go undefeated all the time. I'm that guy too, but I'm also realistic. I also understand that to have success, you need experience and you need time. This isn't the NFL where you have a bunch of professional players and you expect to execute right away. This isn't that, okay? So that's my final thing. I didn't expect to go this long on Scott Frost, but the season has been disappointing for a lot of people, but there's a lot of football to be played. There's a whole entire season left, and I know it doesn't get any easier. You travel to Michigan this week. You play Wisconsin on the road. You play Ohio State on the road. It's not an easy schedule. The Big Ten is a stacked conference. But these players, when you watch them play, they have bought into Scott Frost. So it's time you start doing